Sometimes, the strongest promises are born not from confidence but from despair. And sometimes, the moment we believe we have lost everything is the very moment life begins to rebuild us in ways we never imagined. The church smelled of lilies and rain-soaked coats. A faint draft slipped in each time someone opened the heavy wooden doors, and the air was thick with grief, prayers, and the sound of muffled sobs. Gloria Robinson, 50 years old and widowed too soon, stood at the head of the aisle. Before her rested a coffin of polished mahogany, lined with white satin, holding the man she had loved since she was 20. John Robinson had never been a wealthy man, never owned much more than his calloused hands and a reputation for honesty, but he had been hers, steady, flawed, dependable, and human, and now he was gone. Gloria's black dress clung to her like a costume she hadn't chosen. It pinched at the waist, too tight from long months of stress eating, and the sleeves were slightly short, revealing wrists that carried years of hard work and sacrifice. She held herself stiff, as if posture alone might keep her from collapsing. Behind her, Marcus, her 22-year-old son, sat stone-faced, his jaw clenched the way John's had been when he was angry. Next to him, Aaliyah, 17, pressed a crumpled tissue into her palm. Her mascara bled down her cheeks, her grief tangled with the kind of adolescent anger that had no clear target. The preacher, Pastor James, spoke of heaven and eternal rest. His voice was kind, but Gloria barely heard him. Her ears rang with the hollow echo of silence, the silence that had filled her house since the hospital call, the silence that would greet her each night now. "Beloved," Pastor James intoned, "today we commend John Robinson into God's keeping. A husband, a father, a friend, gone from our sight but not from our hearts." Heads bowed, a chorus of amen. But Gloria remained standing, her eyes fixed on the coffin. Her mind was racing. How will I pay the mortgage? How do I keep Marcus in school? How do I stop Aaliyah from drifting into resentment? For years, she had leaned on John's presence, if not his paycheck. Now, standing in front of everyone, she felt the weight of being both mother and father pressing down on her shoulders. When the service ended, the ushers moved gently to close the casket. The sound of wood meeting metal hinges cracked something inside her. People shuffled, expecting her to follow the casket out. Instead, she turned. The congregation of neighbors, co-workers, and church family froze. They saw her face, pale, resolute, framed by a simple black hat she had borrowed from her sister. Gloria cleared her throat. "I need to say something." Her voice wavered at first, then steadied. "You all knew John. You knew he worked hard, even when his body gave up before he did. You knew he loved this family, even if he didn't always have the words for it. And you know what he leaves behind, 2 children still finding their way." Her gaze fell on Marcus and Aaliyah, who looked up at her with startled eyes. "I don't know how I'll do it," she continued, "but I promise you this. I will raise these children. I will be both father and mother. I will not let John's death be the reason they fail." A silence hung heavy after her words. Some shifted uncomfortably, some wept openly. Pastor James placed a hand over his heart. Gloria wasn't sure where the words had come from. Perhaps it was the sight of Marcus's clenched jaw, the fear in Aaliyah's wet eyes. Perhaps it was her own anger at God, at the world, at every unfair twist of fate. But once spoken, the vow felt larger than her. As the pallbearers lifted the casket, Gloria followed, her heels clicking on the wooden floor. She imagined John's voice in her head, teasing, "Glory, you always did take on too much." She wanted to whisper back, "Yes, but this time I don't have a choice." Outside, the Georgia sky had broken into sunlight, the kind of cruel brightness that feels wrong on a funeral day. People gathered in small clusters, whispering condolences that sounded more like clichés. "Stay strong, Gloria. He's in a better place now. Call if you need anything." She nodded politely, but heard none of it. What she heard instead was the soft tremor of her own words, still echoing, "I will be both father and mother." Marcus walked beside her, hands buried in his suit pockets. He looked down at her, his eyes unreadable. "Mom," he muttered, "you don't have to say stuff like that in front of everyone." "I do," she replied, not breaking stride, "because it's true." Aaliyah tugged at her sleeve. "But what if you can't?" Gloria stopped then, turned to face her daughter. The girl's face was streaked with tears, lips trembling. "Then I'll still try," Gloria said softly. "Even if I fall short, I'll try." They lowered John into the earth that afternoon, the thud of dirt on wood marking an ending none of them were ready for. Gloria's hands trembled as she tossed a single white rose onto the coffin. She whispered a final promise only the ground could hear: "I'll take care of them. I'll carry what you left behind." The crowd began to drift away, cars pulling from the gravel lot. Soon, it was only the three of them, Gloria, Marcus, and Aaliyah, standing awkwardly by the fresh mound of soil. The family was smaller now. But in that reduction, Gloria felt a strange enlargement of her own role, as if life had handed her a burden and a crown at the same time. Later that evening, when the casseroles arrived and the living room filled with murmurs of sympathy, Gloria slipped away to her bedroom. She closed the door, sat on the edge of the bed still indented with John's absence, and let the tears finally come. But even through the sobs, the vow remained. It was not a choice anymore. It was a covenant with her children, with God, with herself. And though she could not know it then, that single promise, to be both father and mother, would open the door to trials she never imagined, betrayals she never expected, and miracles she would one day call her own. Sometimes, the moment you declare you will carry the impossible is the very moment destiny begins to listen. The weeks after John's burial slipped by in a fog. Gloria moved through them like someone walking underwater, each motion heavy, each breath resisted. Bills stacked up on the kitchen counter, casseroles spoiled in the fridge, and friends who had promised to be there returned to their own lives. Grief, she discovered, had no timetable, but the electric company did. So did the mortgage bank, the grocery store, and the school board. So Gloria worked. At 50, she picked up the night shifts at the county hospital, 12 hours of steady footsteps down corridors lit by fluorescent bulbs. She emptied bedpans, changed sheets, and steadied the arms of patients who looked at her with watery eyes. The pay was meager, but the hours were endless. By day, she cleaned offices downtown, her back bent, her hands raw from bleach. She slept in stolen fragments, 3 hours on the sofa before sunrise, another hour at the laundromat waiting for the dryers to spin. Marcus tried to help. He took a job at the campus bookstore, shelving heavy stacks of textbooks. Sometimes he left his shift smelling like dust and paper, eyes red from exhaustion. Gloria scolded him for it. "Your job is school, Marcus. Don't carry what's mine." He only shrugged, jaw set, the way men do when they want to argue but know it won't matter. Aaliyah was different. At 17, her dreams pressed against the limits of their small home like vines seeking light. She filled her notebooks with lyrics, posted shaky videos of herself singing online, and talked endlessly of New York, of studios, of stages. But Gloria, who barely had money for groceries, who counted every gallon of gas, couldn't hear those dreams without fear. "College first," she told her daughter one night as they folded laundry together. "A degree gives you a future. Music is a hobby, not a plan." Aaliyah dropped the towel into the basket, her eyes flashing. "A hobby? Mom, it's the only thing that makes me feel alive." Gloria bit back her response. What she wanted to say was, alive won't pay the rent, alive won't keep the lights on. But she saw John's stubbornness in her daughter's jawline and swallowed the words whole. That was their rhythm now, Gloria sacrificing, Marcus silently absorbing, Aaliyah resisting. In the quiet hours, Gloria would sit at the kitchen table, the same one where John used to read the paper and spread out the bills. Sometimes she cried quietly, making sure the children never heard. She didn't want them to think of her as fragile. She had promised to be both father and mother, and fathers weren't supposed to break. Yet her body betrayed her. The ache in her lower back grew sharper, her knees swelled, and her vision blurred after long nights in the hospital. Still, she pushed on. At church on Sundays, people praised her strength. "You're remarkable, Gloria. I don't know how you do it." She smiled politely, but inside she thought, "I don't know how I do it either." Marcus began to notice the toll. Once, he came home late and found her asleep at the kitchen table, her head resting on an unpaid gas bill, her hand still holding a pen. He covered her with a blanket and whispered, "I'll take care of you someday, Mom." She never stirred. Aaliyah noticed too, but differently. To her, Gloria's exhaustion was another reminder of limitations, of the cage that held them. She wanted glitter, noise, the pulse of city life, not the worn walls of a two-bedroom house in a neighborhood where the paint peeled from porches and sirens cut through the night. One evening, after a particularly sharp argument about college applications, Aaliyah slammed her bedroom door so hard the picture of John fell from the hallway wall. The glass shattered across the floor. Gloria bent to pick it up, her fingers trembling. For a moment, she stared at John's frozen smile behind the cracked pane. "Help me, John," she whispered. "I don't know how to reach her." In truth, she didn't know how to reach either of them. Marcus carried his burden in silence, and Aaliyah pushed back against hers with fury. Gloria stood in the middle, stretched thin, afraid she was failing them both. Yet, in the rare moments of light, she remembered why she endured it all. Like the night Marcus brought home a bag of groceries he'd bought with his own paycheck, insisting she let him cook dinner. They ate spaghetti at midnight, laughing at his oversalted sauce, the house filled for once with something other than worry. Or the morning she woke to Aaliyah's voice drifting from the porch, soft and unguarded, singing a gospel hymn John had loved. The sound carried into the kitchen and made Gloria pause mid-scrub, her heart swelling with both pride and dread. Sacrifice, she realized, was not glamorous. It was not a medal or a sermon or a story told with admiration. It was quiet, invisible, and often mistaken for weakness. It was the ache in her bones and the weight in her chest. It was staying silent when she wanted to scream, working when she wanted to rest, bending so her children could rise. But late at night, when the house was still and the hum of the refrigerator was the only witness, Gloria would close her eyes and whisper the vow again, "I will be both father and mother." She didn't know that her vow, spoken in a trembling voice at John's funeral, had already begun to shape the future. A future filled with betrayals and unlikely allies, with heartbreak and unexpected blessings. For now, all she knew was the sound of her alarm clock at 5:00 a.m., the smell of disinfectant on her hands, and the sight of two children who were growing into adults faster than she could keep up. And though her spirit bent under the strain, it did not break. There is a peculiar cruelty in sacrifice. The more consistent it becomes, the less anyone notices. When you do the impossible long enough, it begins to look ordinary. For Gloria, invisibility had become her daily uniform. She ironed Marcus's shirts before class, slipped $20 bills into Aaliyah's backpack for lunch money, paid overdue bills by selling her wedding jewelry at a pawn shop on the edge of town. And yet, life around her moved as if these things simply happened on their own, as though the house ran on unseen machinery powered by no one in particular. Marcus, buried under coursework and his part-time job, noticed less and less. Aaliyah, caught in the whirlpool of adolescence, noticed nothing at all. One Wednesday morning, Gloria stood at the kitchen sink, the steam from the kettle fogging her glasses. The clock read 6:15 a.m. She had just returned from a night shift, her feet swollen in her sneakers, her back throbbing. She poured coffee into her chipped mug, the one John had once scribbled on with permanent marker, "World's best cook." She wasn't sure whether he had meant it as a joke or a compliment. Aaliyah stumbled into the kitchen, her earbuds already in, music bleeding faintly from them. "Mom, I need money for the field trip," she said, eyes glued to her phone. Gloria rubbed her temples. "I just gave you money for the choir fees. That was last week. This is different. We're going to Nashville. It's important." "I'll see what I can do," Gloria murmured. "You always say that." Aaliyah rolled her eyes, snatched a piece of toast, and walked out before Gloria could answer. The screen door slammed. The mug trembled in Gloria's hand. She placed it gently on the counter, afraid that if she set it down too hard, she'd shatter along with it. Later that evening, Marcus arrived home from his bookstore shift, smelling of dust and tiredness. He found Gloria dozing on the sofa, still in her scrubs. The stack of unopened mail sat on the coffee table, envelopes stamped with final notice. He frowned, his chest tightening. "Mom," he said softly, shaking her shoulder. She startled awake. "I was just resting my eyes. You've been working yourself to death. Let me take on more hours." "No," her voice was firm, almost sharp. "You stay in school. You're the first Robinson who might actually graduate with a degree. Don't throw that away because of me." Marcus clenched his jaw, the argument rising in him like a tide. "I'm not throwing anything away. I'm trying to help. You think being the first to graduate matters if it kills you in the process." The words hung in the room, harsh and uninvited. Gloria turned her face toward the dim lamp, away from him, and whispered, "Your father wanted you to finish what he never could." Marcus exhaled, defeated. He dropped into the armchair opposite her, his shoulders slumped. The gulf between wanting to protect her and wanting to live his own life stretched wider every day. Meanwhile, Aaliyah's rebellion took sharper form. She began staying out later, rehearsing with friends, posting videos of herself singing in borrowed church basements. When Gloria asked about homework, she snapped, "Nobody cares about homework when I can go viral." One night, after Aaliyah missed curfew, Gloria sat awake in the kitchen, the clock ticking past midnight. Her body begged for rest, but her mind raced with dread. When the front door finally creaked open, Aaliyah tiptoed in, still laughing at something on her phone. "Where were you?" Gloria demanded, her voice trembling with fatigue and fury. "Relax, Mom, I was practicing." "Practicing doesn't happen at 1 in the morning. "Neither does living, apparently," Aaliyah shot back. "You wouldn't understand." Gloria's chest tightened. She wanted to shout, to ground her, to list all the dangers of a girl alone at night. Instead, she whispered, "I understand more than you think. I gave up my life so you could have one." Aaliyah froze. For a brief second, guilt flickered across her face. Then she brushed past her mother, muttering, "You always make it about you." The words pierced Gloria deeper than any knife. She sat alone at the table, the silence of the house pressing in, and felt invisible even in her own family. At church that Sunday, Pastor James preached about the unseen servants in life, the ones who sweep the floors, cook the meals, tend the sick. Without them, the world would collapse, he said. Gloria listened, her eyes stinging. She thought of her aching back, her unpaid bills, her children pulling away. Was she collapsing too? After the service, a neighbor approached. "Gloria, you're such a strong woman. Your children are lucky to have you." Gloria forced a smile. Strength had become a mask she wore so often she feared, she no longer had a face beneath it. That night, when she finally lay down, she remembered John's voice. "Don't let them forget you matter too, Glory." She rolled onto her side, staring at the empty pillow beside her, but forgetting seemed inevitable. Her sacrifices were as invisible as the air they breathed, essential, constant, unnoticed. And yet, she reminded herself she had made a vow to be both father and mother, to carry what no one else would, even if no one thanked her, even if no one saw. The trouble was, Marcus and Aaliyah were beginning to see, but what they saw wasn't the sacrifice. It was the cracks, and those cracks would soon widen into something neither of them could ignore. It happened on a Thursday night, one of those shifts that seemed to stretch into eternity. Gloria was in the ER, scrubs damp with sweat, her feet throbbing, her head thick from too much caffeine and too little sleep. Patients kept streaming in: a car accident, a child with a broken arm, a man doubled over from chest pains. The chest pain man was William Anderson. At first, she didn't know who he was. To Gloria, he was just another body on a gurney, another set of frightened eyes searching hers for reassurance. She placed oxygen under his nose, checked his vitals, pressed a calm hand against his arm. "You're going to be all right, sir," she said softly. He clutched her wrist with surprising strength. "Promise?" She smiled faintly. "I don't make promises I can't keep." Hours later, when the tests came back, it turned out to be a severe anxiety attack, not a heart attack. Relief washed over him. He sat upright, embarrassed by his panic, and thanked her with a politeness that carried an echo of old money. "My name's William Anderson," he said, as though the name should mean something. It didn't. Not to Gloria. "That'll be 2 aspirin and a cup of water," she joked, too tired to filter herself. He chuckled, the first real laugh she had heard from a patient in weeks. Over the next few days, Anderson returned for follow-up tests. Each time, Gloria happened to be on duty. They talked, briefly at first, about the weather, about how hospitals never slept, about his late wife and her roses. He noticed the faint lines of exhaustion in Gloria's face, the way she carried herself with a dignity that no fatigue could erase. "You remind me of her," he said once. Gloria frowned. "Your wife?" "Yes, she worked harder than anyone gave her credit for." Gloria didn't know how to respond, so she nodded and moved on. Compliments made her uncomfortable. One evening, when he was leaving, Anderson paused. "You must let me thank you properly. Dinner, perhaps." Gloria stiffened. "I don't go on dates with patients." "It wouldn't be a date," he said quickly. "A thank you, nothing more." She hesitated. Pride told her to refuse, but something in his manner, genuine, almost old-fashioned, softened her resistance. "Fine," she said. "Dinner, but only if you promise not to make it fancy. I'm not used to crystal glasses and waiters in tuxedos." He smiled. "We'll see." Dinner turned out to be at a charity gala, an event Anderson chaired every year for the city's housing fund. The moment Gloria stepped into the ballroom, wearing her one good dress and a pair of borrowed heels, she felt the eyes on her. Men in tailored suits and women in sequined gowns assessed her with a glance, as though she were an imposter who had slipped past the velvet rope. Anderson introduced her warmly. "This is Gloria Robinson, the nurse who quite possibly saved my life," but his words only deepened the scrutiny. People smiled politely, their eyes cold with curiosity. The coldest belonged to his daughter, Vanessa. Vanessa was 32, sleek as glass, her black gown cut sharp as armor. She kissed her father on the cheek and turned to Gloria with a smile that didn't touch her eyes. "So," Vanessa said, her voice honeyed and sharp, "you're the nurse." "Yes," Gloria replied evenly. "That must be hard work." Gloria caught the flicker of disdain beneath the words. She wanted to tell this woman about scrubbing hospital floors at 3 a.m., about holding the hands of dying strangers, about bills that never slept. But instead she simply said, "It is, but it matters." Vanessa's smile thinned. The evening wore on. Gloria felt like a shadow drifting among chandeliers. Conversations circled around stock portfolios, vacations in Italy, renovations of houses larger than her entire block. She clutched her glass of sparkling water and thought of Marcus in the bookstore, Aaliyah in her bedroom with the door slammed shut. When Anderson asked her to dance, she shook her head. "I don't belong here." "You belong wherever you choose to stand," he replied. The words unsettled her, because they sounded like something John might have said in a gentler world. After the gala, Vanessa confronted her father in the parking lot, unaware that Gloria lingered a few steps away. "She doesn't fit, Dad. Can't you see? She's after your money, your name, that's all." Anderson's voice was low but firm. She saved me when no one else was there. Don't mistake dignity for opportunism." Gloria turned and walked toward her car, cheeks burning, heart pounding. She wanted to scream that she hadn't asked for this, hadn't asked to stand under chandeliers or be the target of someone's suspicion. She only wanted to raise her children, keep the lights on, keep her vow. But life, it seemed, was pulling her into a different story. At home that night, Marcus noticed the fatigue etched deeper into her face. "Long shift?" he asked. "Something like that," she murmured, setting her purse down. Aaliyah peeked out from her room. "You smell like perfume. Were you on a date?" Gloria froze. No, it was work. Her daughter smirked, unconvinced. Gloria retreated to her bedroom, sat on the edge of her bed, and stared at the quiet space where John once slept. She thought of Anderson's gratitude, Vanessa's contempt, the shimmer of chandeliers, and the weight of promises still unkept. She didn't know yet that meeting William Anderson would change everything, that his world would collide with hers in ways that would test her vow, stretch her pride, and force her family into storms of conflict they could neither avoid nor ignore. For now, she only knew the quiet ache in her bones, the memory of Vanessa's eyes, and the uneasy truth that sometimes help comes dressed as trouble. Bills had a way of multiplying when you looked away. Gloria returned from her night shifts to find them crowding the kitchen table: electric, water, mortgage, insurance. Each envelope carried the weight of failure, stamped in red ink that felt louder than words. She shuffled them into a neat stack, as if tidiness could disguise desperation. That Saturday morning, Marcus caught her at the table. He had come home early from the bookstore, hoping to surprise her with coffee. Instead, he found her staring at the envelopes like they were tombstones. "Mom," he said carefully, "how far behind are we?" Gloria's instinct was to lie, to say a little, to protect him from the truth. But his eyes, dark, serious, too old for his age, pinned her. 2 months on the mortgage," she whispered. 3 on the utilities. If I miss one more payment, they'll shut off the heat." Marcus sat down heavily, setting the coffee aside. "I'll quit school. Work full-time. That'll cover it." "No." The word came fast, fierce. "You will not throw away your degree because of me." "It's not because of you," he snapped. "It's because we can't keep living like this." Gloria's hands trembled on the table. "Your father wanted more for you, so do I. You stay in school, Marcus. That's not up for debate." The argument ended with silence, but the silence was thick, like 2 sides of a canyon that had no bridge. That evening, her phone buzzed. A message from William Anderson. "There's a benefit dinner Tuesday. Housing fund. Would you join me?" Gloria stared at the screen. She thought of the unpaid bills, of her own exhaustion, of Marcus's eyes. Something inside her whispered, "Say no, stay invisible." But another part, weary of loneliness, desperate for even a glimpse of possibility, typed back, "Yes." The dinner was everything she feared. Another ballroom, another sea of sequins and tailored suits. William was gracious, introducing her to colleagues as though she belonged. But she could feel the judgment, soft as perfume, lingering in the air. Vanessa arrived late, her entrance deliberate. She looked radiant, every step a performance. Her eyes found Gloria instantly. During the meal, Vanessa leaned close to a cluster of women at her table. Gloria, across the room, couldn't hear the words but recognized the look, the tilt of Vanessa's head, the sly smile, the quick glances in Gloria's direction. Gossip was its own language, and she was fluent enough to understand. By dessert, whispers circled like smoke: the widowed nurse, the charity case, the woman cozying up to Anderson money. Gloria felt the heat rising in her cheeks. She excused herself, stepping out into the hallway lined with portraits of donors. Her breath came fast, shallow. She pressed her palm against the cool wall, fighting tears. She didn't see Vanessa approach until the click of heels echoed beside her. "You're brave," Vanessa said smoothly. "I'll give you that." Gloria turned. "Brave? To walk into this world like you belong, to smile at my father as though you have the right. Some women would be ashamed." "I'm not ashamed," Gloria said, though her voice shook. You should be. Vanessa's eyes glittered with cruelty. We all know why you're here. A woman drowning in debt, clutching at the first hand that looks wealthy enough to save her. My father may be too kind to see it, but the rest of us aren't blind. Gloria's chest tightened. I didn't ask him for anything. No, Vanessa agreed. But you'll take it, won't you? That's what women like you do. The words cut deeper than she wanted to admit. For a moment, Gloria saw herself as Vanessa painted her, a tired nurse with overdue bills, a widow grasping for survival. The truth twisted into a weapon. She wanted to answer, to fight back, but something inside her stilled. She thought of her vow, of John's memory, of the quiet dignity she clung to when nothing else remained, so she lifted her chin. You don't know me. Vanessa smiled. I know enough. And with that, she glided back into the ballroom, leaving Gloria in the hallway, her dignity bruised but unbroken. When she returned home that night, Aaliyah was waiting. Where were you? Her daughter demanded. An event for the housing fund. You mean a date, Aaliyah said, her tone edged with accusation. It wasn't, Gloria began, then stopped. What was the point of explaining? Aaliyah crossed her arms. People at school are talking. They saw pictures online. You and that rich guy, you think it's cute. Gloria's breath caught. Pictures? She pulled out her phone. Social media was flooded with images from the gala, women in gowns, men in tuxedos, and there she was. Gloria, standing awkwardly beside William Anderson, her thrift store dress obvious among designer silk. Captions were cruel, from nurse's station to sugar daddy's arm. Every charity case needs a sponsor. Her stomach dropped. Aaliyah's eyes were blazing. Do you have any idea how humiliating this is? Everyone's laughing. They think you're desperate. The words landed like blows. Gloria wanted to scream that she wasn't desperate, she was surviving, that she had scrubbed floors and sacrificed sleep so Aaliyah could dream about music in the first place. But instead she whispered, "Go to bed." Aaliyah slammed her door so hard the frame shook. Gloria sat alone at the kitchen table, phone glowing in her hand, comments scrolling like poison. She set it down, covered her face with her hands, and wept quietly. She had promised to be both father and mother, but tonight she felt like neither. She felt like a ghost in her own story, stripped of dignity, mocked by strangers, doubted by her own child. And though she could not know it yet, this humiliation was only the beginning. The whispers would spread, the debts would tighten, and the line between ally and enemy would blur until she no longer knew who to trust. The invitation came in a thick cream envelope, embossed with gold letters, the Anderson Foundation Annual Banquet. Gloria turned it over in her hands, uncertain. She hadn't planned on going anywhere near the Andersons after the whispers at the last gala. But William had asked her personally, his eyes kind, his voice insistent. You have to come, he'd said. You're part of this, Gloria. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. She wanted to say no. She wanted to avoid the stares, the whispers, the inevitable collision with Vanessa. But part of her, the part that still longed to believe dignity could stand tall among chandeliers, said yes. She borrowed a dress from a church friend, navy blue with a modest neckline. She bought second-hand heels that pinched her toes. When she looked in the mirror, she saw not elegance but effort, and hoped it would be enough. The ballroom was even grander than before, a cathedral of crystal and gold. Gloria entered on William's arm, her pulse pounding in her ears. The crowd turned, the way crowds always do when money walks in. She felt their eyes skim over her like scanners, dress too plain, posture too careful, smile too strained. Vanessa made her entrance half an hour later. Her gown glittered like starlight, her lips painted in a perfect crimson arc. She crossed the floor with a grace that silenced the room, then approached her father with a practiced smile. "Dad," she said, kissing his cheek. Then, with a glance at Gloria, "You brought her." "Yes," William replied firmly. "I did." The smile never left Vanessa's face, but her eyes sharpened like knives. Dinner began with speeches. William spoke of community, of housing initiatives, of giving back. Gloria listened, proud of his sincerity, even if she still felt like an outsider. When applause rose, she clapped politely, hoping to stay invisible. But invisibility was not what Vanessa had planned. Halfway through dessert, Vanessa tapped her glass with a silver spoon. The room quieted, eager for her performance. "I'd like to make a toast," she announced. "To generosity, to charity, to the spirit of helping those less fortunate." Her words dripped with sugar, but her eyes fixed on Gloria. "Tonight, we're honored to have among us someone who embodies resilience. A woman who's faced hardship most of us can only imagine. A widow, a nurse, a mother scraping by. Truly, she represents the kind of person our foundation seeks to uplift." A ripple of laughter ran through the tables, polite, muffled, but sharp enough to sting. Gloria's cheeks burned. She realized with a sinking dread that Vanessa wasn't honoring her. She was showcasing her, holding her up like a specimen, a story of pity dressed as praise. "Let's raise our glasses," Vanessa continued, her smile wide, her voice bright. "To Gloria Robinson, proof that with a little help from generous hearts, even the most unfortunate can find their place among us." The room erupted in polite clinks of crystal. Eyes turned toward Gloria, expectant, amused. She sat frozen, her fork heavy in her hand. She wanted to vanish into the tablecloth. She wanted to shout that she was not a project, not a cautionary tale, not anyone's charity. And then, from the corner of the room, she saw Aaliyah. Her daughter had come as a guest of a school friend whose parents were donors. She stood near the dessert table, clutching a plate, eyes wide, face pale. She had heard every word. The humiliation wasn't just hers anymore, it was her daughter's too. Gloria rose slowly, the scrape of her chair loud in the silence. Her legs trembled, but her voice, when it came, was steady. "Thank you," she said, her eyes sweeping the room. "It's true, I've faced hardship. I work nights at the hospital, I clean offices by day, I stretch dollars until they scream. But don't mistake hardship for weakness. Don't mistake survival for shame. I came here tonight not as a charity case, not as a story for your applause, but as a woman who refuses to bow her head to anyone's pity." The room was still. A single cough broke the silence. Gloria turned toward Vanessa. "You meant to humiliate me, but let me remind you, dignity doesn't come from gowns or bank accounts. It comes from standing up when someone tries to push you down." Her voice cracked on the last word, but it didn't matter. She had said what needed to be said. She gathered her purse, nodded once to William, whose face was stricken with both pride and sorrow, and walked out of the ballroom. Aaliyah followed. Outside, under the cold night air, Gloria leaned against the stone railing, her breath shaking. "Mom?" Aaliyah's voice was soft, broken. "I didn't know. I didn't realize how much you go through." Gloria turned, tears finally spilling. "I didn't want you to know. I wanted you to dream, to live without this weight on your shoulders." Aaliyah threw her arms around her mother, holding her tightly. For the first time in months, Gloria felt the warmth of her daughter not as rebellion, not as defiance, but as love. "You're not invisible," Aaliyah whispered. "Not to me, not anymore." The night hummed with silence, the kind that felt holy. For a moment, humiliation turned into something else, a revelation, a fragile seed of closeness. But Gloria knew seeds needed soil, and soil needed storms. This was only the beginning. The storms were still coming. The Sunday after the banquet, Gloria walked into church with her head lowered. She had never missed a service, not even after John's funeral, not even on the weeks when exhaustion made her knees shake. But today felt different. Today, she feared the stairs. She could still hear the clinking glasses, Vanessa's voice echoing through the ballroom, the polite laughter of strangers. And worse, she could still see Aaliyah's pale face in the corner of the room, watching her humiliation unfold like a play. Inside the sanctuary, the choir was already singing. Gloria slipped into a back pew, hoping to vanish into the music. She bowed her head, but before she could close her eyes, she felt Marcus sit down beside her. He had come home early from campus, his jaw tight, his hands clasped. "I heard what happened," he whispered. Gloria stiffened. "Aaliyah told you." "Yes." His voice trembled with quiet fury. "They had no right." Her throat tightened. "Marcus!" But before she could finish, Aaliyah slid into the pew on her other side. Her daughter's usual sharpness was gone. She leaned against her mother's arm just enough to be felt. "I'm sorry," Aaliyah murmured. "I shouldn't have judged you. I didn't see not until that night." Gloria closed her eyes, overwhelmed by the weight and the warmth pressed against her. For months she had carried them, certain they didn't notice, certain her sacrifices were invisible. And now, in this crowded sanctuary, both of them were finally seeing. When the service ended, Pastor James called her name. "Gloria Robinson," he said, his voice filling the room. "Would you stand?" She froze. Dozens of eyes turned toward her. She wanted to sink into the pew, but Marcus touched her elbow, guiding her to her feet. "This community knows you," Pastor James continued. "We have watched you work nights and mornings. We have watched you raise 2 children with courage, and we have seen the dignity you carry even when others try to strip it away." Gloria's cheeks burned. She wanted to protest, to say she wasn't strong, she was just surviving. But the congregation began to clap, soft at first, then louder, a rhythm that echoed through the rafters. A woman from the choir called out, "You're not alone, Gloria." Another voice added, "We'll help with the bills, whatever you need." The applause swelled. People rose from their seats, some cried openly. Gloria stood trembling, tears streaming down her face. She had walked in with shame. She was leaving with something else, the undeniable knowledge that her struggle was no longer hers alone. That afternoon, back at the house, Marcus cleared the kitchen table. He stacked the unopened bills in a neat pile, pulled out a notebook, and said, "We're going to figure this out, together." Gloria hesitated. "It's not your responsibility." "It is," he interrupted firmly. "We're a family. That means it's all of ours." Aaliyah appeared from her room, holding a jar half filled with coins and crumpled dollar bills. "This is from tips I got singing at the cafe last month. It's not much, but it's something." Gloria stared at her children, one son willing to sacrifice his future, one daughter offering her small treasure, and felt something break open inside her. "Put it away," she whispered. They frowned, confused. "Not because I don't need it. God knows I do. But because today you showed me something worth more than money. You showed me I'm not invisible. You see me. That's all I needed." For the first time in months, they ate dinner together without tension. Marcus cracked jokes about his professors. Aaliyah hummed a tune between bites. Gloria listened, laughing softly, her heart both heavy and light. In the weeks that followed, the support from the church began to arrive. Bags of groceries left on the porch. Envelopes tucked quietly into her mailbox. A neighbor offering to fix the leaky faucet free of charge. It was humbling, even uncomfortable, for Gloria to accept. Pride told her to refuse, but love told her to let people in. One evening, Pastor James stopped by. He carried no sermon, just a basket of fruit and a quiet smile. "You don't have to carry everything alone," he said gently. Gloria sat with him on the porch, watching the streetlights flicker. "I promised John I'd be both father and mother. I thought that meant I had to do it without leaning on anyone." Pastor James shook his head. "Being both doesn't mean being everything. It means showing your children what courage looks like, and sometimes courage is letting others help." The words sank into her like water into dry soil. Still, the shadows lingered. The humiliation at the banquet had not disappeared from people's whispers. Vanessa's smear spread online, magnified by the cruel humor of strangers. Gloria's dignity had been defended in church, but the outside world remained unkind. At night, when she closed her eyes, she replayed the scene, Vanessa's smile, the clinking glasses, the pitying stares. Each time, her chest tightened with shame. But then she remembered Aaliyah's arms around her, Marcus's voice fierce with defense, the applause in the sanctuary. And slowly the memory shifted. The humiliation became not an ending but a beginning, because solidarity had roots. And roots, even unseen, have the power to crack concrete. The weeks after the banquet carried an uneasy quiet, like the stillness before a storm. Gloria went back to her shifts, back to her routine of scrubbing, healing, counting every dollar. Outwardly, nothing had changed, but inside her, something had shifted. She no longer walked into church with her head lowered. She no longer hid the bills from Marcus or shushed Aaliyah when she asked about money. Shame had loosened its grip, if only slightly. But outside their small home, whispers kept spreading. Photos from the gala lingered online, accompanied by captions that stung like nettles. The nurse who caught a rich man's eye, every charity case needs a sponsor. At first, Gloria tried to ignore them, but then Marcus showed her something one evening, his laptop open on the kitchen table. "Look," he said. A local blog had picked up the story, not of Gloria the gold digger, but of Gloria the nurse. Someone had recorded her words that night, when she had stood against Vanessa's toast and spoken of dignity. The video showed her trembling but steady, her voice cutting through the glitter and the cruelty. The comments surprised her. "This woman is braver than half the people in that room, not weakness. Strength. Reminds me of my mom who raised us alone." Gloria stared at the screen, speechless. She had expected mockery. Instead, strangers saw her not as a spectacle, but as a mirror of their own lives. Across town, Vanessa Anderson was facing whispers of her own. It began as a murmur, a question about missing funds from the Housing Foundation. Then it grew louder, spreading through boardrooms and charity circles. Someone had noticed discrepancies in the financial reports, numbers that didn't add up, receipts that seemed altered. Gloria heard about it through Pastor James, who stopped by one afternoon with a solemn look. "Word is, Vanessa's in trouble," he said. "They're saying she siphoned money from the foundation for her personal accounts." Gloria blinked, stunned. "Are you sure?" "Sure enough that the papers are sniffing around. Truth has a way of leaking, Gloria, even through marble walls." She thought of Vanessa's glittering smile, her sharp words at the banquet, the cruelty disguised as charity. The idea that the same woman could be stealing from the very cause she pretended to champion filled Gloria with a strange mixture of sadness and grim relief. 2 days later, it hit the news. Local channels ran the headline, "Anderson heiress under investigation for misuse of foundation funds." Pictures of Vanessa, flawless and smiling, flashed across screens, paired with scrolling text about embezzlement, tax fraud, betrayal of donors. For the first time in weeks, Gloria felt the weight shift. The humiliation she had carried began to slide off her shoulders. People were no longer whispering about the widow who didn't belong. They were whispering about the daughter who betrayed her father's trust. Aaliyah showed her the articles on her phone. "Mom, everyone's talking about this. They're even mentioning you. That video of your speech, it's everywhere." Gloria frowned. "Everywhere. Like thousands of shares, people saying you spoke truth to power, that you stood up when most would have stayed quiet." The thought unsettled her. She hadn't meant to become anyone's example. She had only wanted to protect her dignity, to keep her children from drowning in her shame. But now, people were listening. That Sunday after service, a woman approached her in the parking lot. She was young, with 2 children tugging at her skirt. "Mrs. Robinson?" the woman asked softly. "Yes. I just wanted to say thank you. I saw your video. I've been working 2 jobs since my husband left. People look at me like I'm less. But when you said survival isn't shame, I felt like you were talking to me." Gloria's throat tightened. She took the woman's hand. "You're not less, you never were." The woman nodded, tears in her eyes, then left with her children. Gloria sat in her car afterward, her hands trembling on the steering wheel. For years she had lived unseen, her sacrifices invisible. Now, people she had never met were seeing her not for her debts, not for her exhaustion, but for her strength. At the Anderson estate, the fallout deepened. William Anderson, weary and ashamed, released a statement confirming an internal audit. Reporters camped outside the gates, cameras flashing. Vanessa, once the darling of charity circles, vanished from the spotlight. Rumors swirled of her resignation from the foundation board, of frozen accounts, of a father's fury behind closed doors. Gloria received a call from William one evening, his voice heavy. "I'm sorry," he said. "You should never have been dragged into our family's mess." "You don't owe me an apology," Gloria replied quietly. "Maybe not, but I owe you gratitude. You spoke truth when no one else would, and people listened. I should have defended you that night. Instead, I let her cruelty stand. That's on me." Gloria didn't know what to say, so she said the only thing that felt honest: "I'm just trying to survive." And in doing so, he answered, "You've done more than most of us." The storm outside grew louder: headlines, investigations, donors pulling out. But inside Gloria's small house, something different was happening. Marcus studied harder, determined to graduate, his resolve sharpened by his mother's public dignity. Aaliyah began to practice with new fire, her songs filled with rawness she had never touched before. And Gloria herself, though still weary, carried herself a little taller. Because she had learned something she had never expected: humiliation could be turned inside out. The same stage where you are mocked can become the stage where you are honored. The difference was not in the crowd. It was in the courage to stand when they tried to make you small. Opportunity often arrives disguised as a risk. For Gloria, it came in the form of a phone call late one evening, when the house was quiet and the only sound was the hum of the refrigerator. "Mrs. Robinson," William Anderson's voice rumbled softly, "I know you're probably tired of hearing from me, but I'd like to meet. Not at a gala, not at a banquet, somewhere simple. Neutral, would you allow that?" Gloria hesitated. Every instinct told her to decline. Every encounter with his world had left her burned. But curiosity, and perhaps a faint thread of trust, tugged her forward. "All right," she said, "but somewhere ordinary. A diner, maybe." "Perfect," he replied. They met at a small diner off Highway 54, the kind of place with cracked vinyl booths and coffee that tasted faintly of burnt toast. William arrived in a plain jacket, no chauffeur, no entourage. For the first time, Gloria saw him not as a man of wealth, but as a man carrying his own kind of loneliness. He ordered coffee. She ordered tea. "I've been watching the fallout," he admitted. "The foundation is in pieces. Vanessa, she'll face her consequences. But in the wreckage, I keep thinking about what you said that night. About dignity. About survival not being shame." Gloria shifted uncomfortably. "I wasn't giving a speech. I was just trying to protect myself. Sometimes the words spoken in defense are the ones the world most needs to hear," he said gently. He leaned forward. "I want to help, not as charity, not as pity, but as an investment." Her brows knit. "Investment in what?" "In you, and in what you represent. A center, a place for families like yours. A place where dignity and support meet. Call it a community hub, call it a shelter, call it what you will. I'll put up the funds, but it has to be yours. Your vision." Gloria blinked, stunned. The idea felt impossible. She was a nurse, not a leader. She could barely keep her own lights on, let alone run something for others. "I can't," she whispered. "I'm not." "You are," William interrupted firmly. "You've already built something, your children. The way they look at you, the way they defend you, that's leadership." His words settled into her chest, both heavy and warming. When she told Marcus and Aaliyah later that night, they stared at her as though she had spoken a foreign language. "A center," Marcus repeated, eyes wide. "Like a community place?" Aaliyah asked. "Yes," Gloria said cautiously. "For single parents, for families who are struggling." He offered the money, but he says it has to be me who shapes it. Silence filled the room. Then Marcus leaned forward. "Mom, you should do it." Gloria blinked. "You think so? You've been carrying us for years. Imagine what you could do if you had support instead of obstacles." His voice was fierce, filled with conviction. Aaliyah chimed in softer but no less sure. "It would help people like us. Like me, when I wanted to sing and thought nobody saw me. Like you, when you were invisible, you could make sure no one else feels that way." Gloria swallowed hard, tears pricking her eyes. For the first time, her children weren't just watching her sacrifice. They were urging her forward. The planning began slowly. William introduced her to an attorney, to an architect, to people who spoke in terms she barely understood. But Gloria insisted on one thing: the center would not be marble floors and grand chandeliers, it would be warmth, simplicity, practicality. "I don't want a palace," she told them. "I want a kitchen where a single mother can cook a hot meal, a study room where kids can do homework, a clinic corner where someone like me can check blood pressure and hand out medicine." The architect frowned at first, expecting something flashier, but William smiled. "Do it her way," he said. "That's why we're here." The name came to her one night while folding laundry. She thought of John, of the promise she had made at his funeral, of the vow to be both father and mother. She thought of ashes and how something stronger can sometimes rise from them. "Robinson Care House," she whispered. The opening months were chaotic. Gloria juggled her shifts with endless meetings. Marcus helped with paperwork, his organized mind turning chaos into order. Aaliyah painted murals on the walls, bright colors that made the rooms feel alive. Volunteers from church came, bringing furniture, painting walls, stocking shelves. Donations arrived, not in marble but in bags of canned goods, boxes of notebooks, stacks of blankets. The day the center opened, the parking lot overflowed. Families streamed in, tired mothers with children on their hips, fathers out of work, teenagers who carried the same restless fire as Aaliyah. Gloria greeted them one by one, shaking hands, offering smiles, guiding them to food, to counseling, to study spaces. As she stood in the doorway, watching the rooms fill with life, Marcus leaned against the wall, his arms crossed, a rare smile softening his face. "You did it, Mom," he said. "No," she replied, her eyes shining. "We did it." Later that evening, after the crowd had gone, Gloria walked through the empty halls. The scent of fresh paint mixed with the faint aroma of coffee. The walls were scuffed already, the chairs slightly askew. But to her, it was perfect. She sat at one of the tables, exhausted but filled with a kind of peace she hadn't felt in years. For once, her labor wasn't invisible. It was tangible, brick and mortar, walls and warmth. And though storms would still come, debts, judgments, betrayals, tonight she allowed herself to believe in rebirth. From ashes, something had risen. By autumn, the Robinson Care House was no longer just an idea. It was alive. Children's laughter filled the study rooms, volunteers served meals in the kitchen, and families who had known only struggle now found a place that felt like home. Gloria moved through its halls with quiet pride, her hands still rough from years of scrubbing floors, her back still aching, but her spirit lighter than it had been in decades. Yet while Gloria's world was rising, Vanessa's was crumbling. News stations ran nightly stories about the missing funds. Donors demanded answers. Investigators combed through records and found evidence of misused money, private vacations charged to the foundation, designer clothes hidden behind event expenses. Her name, once synonymous with elegance, was now a headline for disgrace. One evening, after a long day at the care house, Gloria found herself watching the news in her living room. Vanessa's face appeared on the screen, her perfect hair pulled back tightly, her smile gone. Reporters swarmed her outside a courthouse. "MS. Anderson, did you embezzle funds? Do you have a statement for the donors who trusted you?" She pushed through the crowd in silence, her eyes hollow. Aaliyah, curled on the couch beside her mother, whispered, "She looks broken." Gloria said nothing. She didn't feel triumph, only a strange, solemn sadness. For cruelty always carried its own weight, and eventually it crushed the one who bore it. The following week, William appeared at the care house unannounced. He stood in the doorway as children played tag down the hall, his face lined with exhaustion. "Gloria," he said, "I owe you more than gratitude. I owe you an apology." She frowned. "For what?" "For letting Vanessa's cruelty touch you, for standing silent when you needed defending. A father should protect his daughter, but I should have remembered that protection doesn't mean enabling her cruelty." Gloria studied him, seeing not the wealthy tycoon but a man burdened by regret. "You can't change the past," she said softly, "but you can decide what you do now." He nodded, eyes glistening. "I already have. Vanessa is no longer part of the foundation. She'll face her consequences, and I've told the board that every cent she stole will be repaid by me." Gloria inhaled, surprised. "That's a heavy cost." "Not as heavy as living with silence," he replied. 2 weeks later, the city held its annual Community Service Awards. Gloria hadn't expected to be there. She thought her work was still too new, too small. But one afternoon, Pastor James stopped by with a broad smile and an envelope. "You've been nominated," he said. "For what?" she asked, bewildered. "For showing us all what resilience looks like." The ceremony was held in the Civic Center, far humbler than the glittering banquets of the Andersons, but to Gloria, it felt like a cathedral. The audience was filled with teachers, nurses, volunteers, single parents, people who carried invisible burdens like hers. When her name was called, she walked to the stage in her simple navy dress, the same one she had worn months ago at the gala. This time, no one laughed. The applause thundered. She stood at the podium, her hands trembling, her heart pounding. She looked out at the sea of faces, then thought of John, his coffin, her vow, the long nights she had feared she would fail. "I am no different from any of you," she began. "I have worked nights when I wanted to sleep. I have cried when no one was watching. I have felt invisible in a world that only applauds the shiny and the wealthy. But tonight, I want to tell you something. Survival is not shame. Hardship is not weakness. Every sacrifice is a seed, and sometimes those seeds grow into something bigger than we ever imagined." Her voice wavered, but the room leaned in, listening. "I promised my children I would be both father and mother. I thought that meant carrying everything alone. But I have learned something. Strength isn't about carrying it all. Strength is about standing when others try to push you down and letting others stand beside you when your knees give way." The crowd rose to its feet, applause echoing off the walls. Marcus stood in the aisle, clapping with tears in his eyes. Aaliyah, radiant, recorded the moment on her phone, whispering, "That's my mom." Gloria closed her eyes for a moment, letting the sound wash over her. It wasn't victory she felt. It wasn't revenge. It was recognition, the one thing she had never dared hope for. That night, after the ceremony, William approached her quietly. He carried no grandeur, no speeches, only sincerity. "You've given back more than I ever could," he said. "And you've shown me what real legacy looks like. It's not wealth, it's not titles, it's the lives we lift when they're sinking." Gloria met his gaze. "We all carry our own storms. I just tried not to let mine drown me." He smiled faintly. "And in doing so, you taught the rest of us how to swim." Back at home, Gloria placed the award, a simple plaque, on the mantel. Aaliyah snapped a photo of it, posting it online with a caption that read, "She carried us." Now the world knows it too. Within hours, the post spread. Not as scandal, not as gossip, but as a story of hope. For once, Gloria wasn't invisible. She was seen not for her debts, not for her humiliation, but for her strength. Justice had been served. And though it hadn't come wrapped in vengeance, it had come wrapped in truth. And truth, Gloria realized, was the only victory that ever mattered. Winter arrived quietly, layering the city in pale light and soft breath. For Gloria, the season no longer felt heavy. The care house, once just a dream spoken over diner coffee, pulsed with warmth. Children studied under lamps in the homework room, volunteers baked pies in the kitchen, and music floated from the common hall where Aaliyah rehearsed with a choir of neighborhood teens. It was not perfect. Bills still arrived. Exhaustion still lingered in her bones, but for the first time since John's passing, life felt whole again. Not because the pain had vanished, but because something stronger had grown around it. One afternoon, Gloria stood outside the care house, watching Marcus haul in a box of donated books. He was taller than John had been, broad-shouldered, his confidence no longer borrowed but his own. He paused to grin at her. "Semester's almost over," he said. "One more term and I'll have that degree." Pride swelled in her chest. "Your father would be proud." He shook his head. "You're the reason I got this far, Mom. Not him, not anyone else." Gloria smiled, blinking back tears. She thought of the countless nights she had stayed awake, working double shift so tuition checks wouldn't bounce. Every sacrifice was etched into this moment, her son on the edge of a future she once thought impossible. Inside, Aaliyah's voice rose in song. She was rehearsing for a showcase downtown, the first real opportunity of her young career. The lyrics, written by her own hand, echoed through the hall, about struggle, about loss, about a mother who never let go. When the song ended, she ran to her mother, cheeks flushed. "Did you hear me? I didn't crack on the high note this time." "You were perfect," Gloria whispered, pulling her into a hug. "I'm only perfect because you kept pushing me," Aaliyah said. "Even when I hated it, even when I didn't understand." Gloria kissed her forehead. "I didn't want to cage your dreams. I just wanted to make sure you had wings strong enough to carry them." Aaliyah smiled, her eyes shimmering with a new kind of love. The care house's halls filled not only with families in need, but with something deeper, the sense of chosen family. Gloria had learned that family was not only blood. It was anyone who showed up, who held you when you broke, who walked beside you when the road grew long. She thought often of that Sunday in church when the community rose to clap for her, of the woman in the parking lot who said her words had changed her life, of the children who now looked at her with hope instead of pity. For 6 years after John's passing, she had carried the vow alone. I will be both father and mother. But now she understood something new. She was never meant to do it alone. She had her children, her church, her community, and even William, whose life had intersected hers in ways she never foresaw. His presence was steady but respectful, offering support without suffocating her pride. For once, she didn't feel like a charity case. She felt like a partner in something larger. On the first anniversary of the care house's opening, the community gathered. There were balloons, tables of food, laughter echoing in the cold air. Gloria stood at the entrance, watching the faces, tired mothers, hopeful teenagers, elderly neighbors who came for companionship. Pastor James raised a glass of cider and said, "To Gloria Robinson, a woman who turned her vow into a village." Cheers erupted. Marcus clapped the loudest, Aaliyah wiped her eyes, and Gloria felt her chest swell with something she could only call grace. She didn't feel invisible anymore. She felt seen, not because of recognition or awards, but because every person in that building carried a piece of her story, and she carried theirs. That night, after the celebration ended, Gloria walked home alone. Snowflakes drifted under the streetlights, glowing like tiny lanterns. She thought of John, of his laugh, his quiet strength, the way he once teased her for taking on too much. She paused under the cherry tree in front of her house, its bare branches reaching for the sky. "I did it, John," she whispered. "Not alone, but I did it." She placed her hand over her heart, feeling both the ache of loss and the fullness of new life. For the first time since his passing, the ache no longer felt like emptiness. It felt like soil where something beautiful had taken root. And as she walked inside, greeted by the laughter of her children and the warmth of a house alive with love, she knew the vow she had once spoken through tears at his funeral had carried her here to a place not of survival but of rebirth. Epilogue. Sometimes life shatters us in 5 minutes. Sometimes it rebuilds us in 5 years. The secret is this: we are never meant to carry it alone. Gloria's story was never only about her. It was about Marcus and Aaliyah, about Pastor James and the congregation, about William and even Vanessa, whose cruelty carved a path for truth to shine brighter. It was about every unseen mother, every overlooked father, every child who dreams despite the weight of the world. Her vow to be both father and mother had come true, but more than that, she had become something else entirely. A woman who showed that dignity cannot be stolen and love cannot be silenced. And that, she realized, was enough. Love letter closing note to the audience. Thank you for walking this journey with Gloria and her family. May her story remind you that even in moments of humiliation, strength can rise. May it remind you that survival is not shame, and that love, especially the fierce love of a parent, can build miracles out of ashes. I wish you and your families health, peace, and happiness. Hold your loved ones close, honor their sacrifices, and never forget: sometimes the smallest acts of love are the ones that change everything.